Hey guys, and welcome to the video about drivers and devices. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create your own driver so your customers can add their devices to Homey. Now let's start. What is a driver? If you look in the Homey app and you tap Add My First Device, or the plus in the top right, you probably have already some devices added, then you will see all the brands that are available to your Homey in this screen. And you can see Homey already find some brands, and Homey here is all already there, just for the basic devices. But you probably want your own brand in there, right? So in our app, we're going to add a driver, and when you add a driver, then it will appear in this screen. To give you an example, so you can see here that Homey has found Philips Hue, for example. And when I tap it, everything you see here is a driver. And the driver is something that users can identify as their device. To create your first driver, go to the terminal on your computer and then make sure you're in the right directory. Then type the command Homey app driver create. It's very similar to creating a flowcard. First question is, what is your driver's name? And the name is something that your customer will see when trying to add their device. So make sure it's recognizable for the customer, that they know that the device they're holding in their hand is the same as your driver. So I'll call this light bulb because in this video I want to create a driver for a generic light bulb. The driver ID is something that you use only in code. So it's not visible to the user, so make sure it's just recognizable for you only. Light bulb is fine. The third question is, what is your driver's class? And a driver's class is basically the type of the device. So it can be a light bulb, it can be a curtain, it can be a speaker. What else do we have? So make sure you pick the right one, because Homey's interface will adapt based on the driver's class. So if you select light here, then in the Homey app, you might see a little indicator which indicates the color of the light. And that differs per device class, of course. The next question is, what are your driver's capabilities? And capabilities are the things for a driver that you will work most often with. A capability is something a device can do. So a light can turn on and off, and that's a capability. But it can also change the brightness, and that's also a capability. So here you can select what your device is able to do, and then Homey knows what it can show to the user in the interface, in flowcards, etc. So our light can turn on and off and can change the brightness. So we'll search for the right capabilities. So dim level we use for the brightness. And then we have turned on is a capability that we use for, well, if it's turned on. And these capabilities are different types. So the brightness is a number and turned on is a Boolean. There are also string capabilities. And there are also enums, which is a predefined set of capability values. For example, a thermostat mode can be auto, heating, cooling, or off. Next question, do you want to create a discovery strategy? Not for our device, but this is useful if your device is broadcasting itself on a Wi-Fi network using MDNS or SSDP. But we will not use that in this case. And it all seems good. So now our driver has been created in the folder drivers / the ID of the driver, so light bulb, and all the files are here. And you see that a few files have been created. So device.js, driver.js, and driver compose.json. So if you open driver compose.json, this is the file that will be merged when your app is being built to your app.json. And it tells Homey that you have a driver and what it can do. And if you look in here, you see all the things we just entered during the interview when we were creating the driver with Homey CLI. So you see the class, you see the capabilities, you see the name, which is, remember, a translatable object. So your driver name can be different in a different language. And we see a few images, and these images are visible in the App Store. Then we have driver.js, and this is the JavaScript file that is being executed for every driver once. So if your app has one driver, then you will get one instance in memory for this driver. And if we look here, you can see the onInit function. So it's very similar to app.js, but in this case it's driver. And this method will be executed when your driver starts. And then the second function we'll come to later. It's about how to add a device using your driver. And then the other file, device.js, we'll dive in a little bit later. But a device is basically an instance of your driver. And that's pretty hard. So let me just draw it out for you. And you can see the hierarchy of the app drivers and devices in your app. So I got a whiteboard here, and it makes it easy to just draw out the hierarchy. So if you look at your Homey app, on top, there's always your app. And there's always one instance for your app in memory. So when I say instance, I mean an instance of a JavaScript class. So this is app.js, and we automatically create an instance for that. So that's app. And then an app can have multiple drivers. So let me draw that out for you as well. So drivers are of course optional. Not every app does need a driver, but most apps do because they want to connect some device to Homey. And this is the first driver, and then let's just draw a second one. So let's say our example app has a light bulb driver. Let me just draw a great light bulb here. And we have a button driver. So our brand sells buttons that you can press and the light turns on, etc. And we want to connect both to Homey. So this is what we put into our code, and that tells the user and Homey that we have two drivers and you can add them. But when a customer wants to add their devices, they might have more than one light bulb or more than one button. So your driver is there to manage something we call devices. And a device can be basically created an infinite amount of times, dependent on how many devices your customer has. So this is the first device, and it probably has a different name, like living room. And then we have a second device. And basically you can have a lot more devices added here. And the same is for this one, but then it's a different device. So your app is being based on app.js. Your driver is being based on driver.js. And your device is being based on device.js. And that's how your app hierarchy will look like when you code it. Now let's write the code so a customer can add a device using your driver. So the first thing you see here in driver.js is that there's a method called onPairListDevices. And this is a helper method that we automatically add when you type Homey app driver create, because most apps will only search the network for a device and they show a list to the user of what you found, and the user can then add them. So you can create more complex ways of adding a device. In essence, those are just HTML views you can completely customize, but for most apps this is the best. So in this video we'll also show you how to use this. First, you have to go to driver.compose.json and you have to type a property called pair. So adding a device we call pairing. There's also something called repairing if your device is broken and it needs to be repaired by the user, so user interaction is required. It's very similar, but for now we'll focus on pairing. And a pairing is an array that is composed of steps. And a step is a view or a screen that a user see, and they can press next and then they go to the next step, etc. In our case, there are two steps. The first one we call list devices, and we base that on a template. And when we type template here, that means that use a HTML file that Homey has included, so we don't have to code our own. And that's also called list devices. And then there is a second step, also the last one, it's called add devices. And that basically grabs the devices that the user has selected during list devices and then adds them to Homey. It's also based on a template called add devices. We're almost done. We need to add one more property called navigation, and with a subproperty next. And navigation is about the buttons you see below on your screen. There can be next, done, or previous. We want one button called next, and that links to add devices. So this might be a little bit like, hey, where the hell did you get that from? Well, just copy and paste this from our documentation. Once you start creating your own pairing templates, it will become very clear. But most people won't even need that, so just copy and paste this and you're good to go. So let's run our Homey app and see what it looks like. So we type Homey app run, and then the app will be built and sent to Homey here. And now in the add the device screen, you can see that our Hello World app has become visible. So when we tap it, you see that the driver we just created. So it's called Lightbulb, and it inherits the icon of the app. Later on in the video, we'll add a custom icon as well. So now when we tap it, you'll see, do you want to add this? Yes, I want. And now the list devices template is being called. And what we see is here, no new devices have been found. Well, why is that? If you go back to driver.js, you can see here that the function onPair list devices is returning an empty array. So we have to fill that array somehow. And usually you do that by searching the network or logging in or whatever, and then return a list of your devices. So, well, let's just do that. But first we have to close our Homey app. So it's already being filled by some example. So let's uncomment that. And it's called my device. So let's call it my Lightbulb here. This is the name of the device that you have found. Most devices already have a name because they're set up using another app, like the app from the brand on iOS or Android or whatever. Then there's a second property, data. And data is very important. It's a unique object, specifically unique to that device. So everything you put in there must be unique to that device only. And it's also, those should be properties that can never change. So don't put in an IP address, but put in a MAC address, for example, or a hardware ID. So just keep it simple, and I'll call this my device 001. And this way, Homey will be able to tell the difference between different devices. So also, when you run this function again, you can just send the same devices back, and Homey will automatically show the devices the user doesn't have yet. So you as a developer don't even have to think about filtering devices that might have already been added. And then there's another property, it's called store. And store is basically a storage where with properties you can change on the fly in code. We don't need it for our use case, but a store is something where you might be able to store like a pin code or something that might change over time, but probably will keep alive for some time. All right, let's save this, head back to our terminal and run the app again. And now let's see if Homey finds a device. There, it found our Lightbulb with the name my Lightbulb. It also shows the icon, and it's already being selected. So the user just has to press next, and then the device is added to Homey. And as you can see, we said it was a light because the class was a light, and you can see here the indicator in the device style on the top right is a light icon because it's turned on. And here you can see the capabilities have already been added. So this is the turned on capability. The ID of that is on off. And then this is the brightness capability we call dim. So you can change these capabilities, but you will get an error, missing capability listener. And that means that in our code, we didn't yet connect the capability we set the device at with code to actually change the capability. So let's do that next. So now it's time to open up device.js in our editor. And you can see that a lot of methods have already been added here, so you can change them according to how your device should behave. The method we're currently interested in is called onInit. And onInit is being called every time your device is being initialized, which is every time your app starts, which is therefore every time Homey starts, or basically every time you stop and restart the app. Also, after a device has been added, onInit is also called. So that's the place to put all your logic to initialize your device. What we have to do, we have to register a capability listener that tells Homey, if you want to change my on-off or dim capability, execute this code. And it's very simple. Just call register capability listener, where the first argument is the capability ID, So that's called on-off. Let's go back here for a sec. So you see in our driver.compose.json, capabilities are dim and on-off. So they should be exactly the same. And then the second argument should be a promise returning function. So if you type async and then an anonymous function, that means that when the function is being executed, a promise will be returned. And now we can show here a log, for example, turned on-off. And if we log the value, and that's the first argument in this anonymous function, then you can see that when we do this, that the log will trigger. So let's just see if that works. So if you go back to the Homey app, you see the device is unavailable because your app was uninstalled. Now the app is installed again. We go back to the toggle, which is the on-off screen. And now if we turn it on, you see in the console, turned on-off is true. And if we turn it back off, the on-off value becomes false. So normally you would then take that value, so the true or the false, and send it to the device using the communication protocol of your device. So if your device uses a local LAN network, then you would send that value over the line. If you have a Z-Wave device, you would transform that into a Z-Wave packet, etc. We won't dive into that right now because there are too many different ways of doing that. But for now, this is how you add a capability listener. And of course, if we want to be very neat, we have to also do that for the dim capability. And let's see if that works as well, because now we do expect a number to be returned instead of a Boolean when we change the slider. So let's put it all the way up, and then you can see dim is 1, and if we put it down, dim is 0.36, 0.14, and even 0. Let's turn it on again, and you see that all the capabilities are changing accordingly. Now, what if your device changes its state remotely? So Homey doesn't know about it yet. So for example, when a user pushes a button on the device turns on, but Homey still thinks it's turned off. So your app should take the responsibility of having some communication between your device and know as fast as possible that something has changed. Because then we can start flows, for example, and that allows users to automate their home when something happens remotely. So we showed with a register capability listener how it goes from Homey to the device. And there's another method called setCapabilityValue, and that is from the device to Homey. So the first argument is the capability ID, and the second argument is the value. So when we execute this, your app tells Homey that your device has just been turned on somewhere else. And to demonstrate this, let's put it in an interval of 5 seconds. And then after 2.5 seconds, we want to turn it off again. So this is not really useful code, of course. Normally you would have an event listener or something that happens remotely. But in our case, so what happens every 5 seconds, the device is being turned on remotely, and then 2.5 seconds later, it's being turned off again. Now, remember, these are all promises, so you should catch them. If something happens, then your app will probably crash if you didn't catch them. So make sure to always catch your promises. Now, let's run this code. And if all goes well, then after a few seconds, we should see that the device turns on. Well, it was already on, so it turns off, and it turns back on again. And it turns off, and it turns on again. So a user can now go to Flow, create a new flow, select your device, say turned on, and then go to then. And for this example, let's just animate the LED ring, blue, like that. So if we look at Homey here, then every time your device turns on, the LED ring will blink blue. And that way, you just have to provide the information or the state of your device using the SDK, and then it hooks into everything else Homey already does. So it's that easy. The big challenge usually is getting this information from a device, but that's something not for this video because it really depends on the device. But normally you would use for internet things, you would use webhooks or a socket, like a WebSocket or event source. For Z-Wave Zigbee, we've created abstractions for that. For Bluetooth, you use notifications, and depending on your device, there might be other ways, but these are usually the most common ones. So something else that you should know about when creating a driver is something we call unavailable state. So it might occur that a device is not available at the moment. So maybe the user unplugged it, it didn't have any power, or the Wi-Fi is down, or whatever reason, your app can then tell Homey the device is unavailable. And that means that all the interactions like setting capability values, starting flows, all that stuff that has to do with your driver will be blocked by Homey with an error message to the user, sorry, the device is currently unavailable. So how do you do that? Well, let's remove this code and simply call the method this.setUnavailable. That's it. And if you call this method, then Homey will mark the device as unavailable. Now, it's not really user-friendly yet because the user doesn't know why it's unavailable. So you can add a message here, and maybe you know why it's unavailable, like cannot reach the device on the local Wi-Fi. And also, this is a promise, so make sure to catch it. Now let's run this code and open the Homey app. You already see the red triangle. Well, that's because our app is uninstalled. Now the app is installed, but there's still this red triangle because your device is unavailable. And now the user can see the error message here in your device. Now, I did cheat a little bit because I typed English into our code. And not all the Homey users speak English. So you should make sure there's a translatable string available. So what you can do here, you can move this string to the file locals en.json, en stands for English, and then you create a key such as device_unavailable. This is really up to you what you put in there. So I see I copied some quotes, let's remove those. And copy the key of this string, and now go back to device.js and then type this.homey.__ with the key. Underscore is kind of a translation convention programmers use around the entire world, so we also do that. And now the string will be the same as you just saw, but if I add a new file, for example, nl.json, and I use the same key, so let's just copy this over, but then change it to dash. Then Dutch users will get a nice Dutch unavailable message. And now, lastly, if your device is available again, maybe you found it on the network again, or you got a message from the device, you can make it available again just by typing this.setAvailable. There's no message there because the device is available, so the user doesn't have to do anything. And that's how you manage the availability state of your device within device.js. Now let's add a great icon to our driver, so users can actually recognize what device they are using. To do this, you have to find a great icon in the SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics format, and then put it in your drivers folder in the assets directory. So I found already an icon here on the internet, which is royalty free, and I can then drag it over here. Oh, make sure it's in the right folder. And then name it icon.svg. So this is a fixed name, you don't have to reference it, Homey recognizes it automatically. And now the only thing I have to do is run the app again. Let's go back here so we can actually see the icon. And now it might take a few seconds the first time your icon is being loaded. But here you can see the icon I just added on the device tile. And also when I want to add a new device, you can also see the icon appear there. So obviously not all programmers are great icon artists. So we do offer a free service to create great icons for your apps. You can find about that more in our documentation. But we have people working on these icons and they love to make them for you to create a great unified Homey experience. And that concludes this video about drivers and devices. I hope you've learned a lot about the hierarchy between those and how to manage your device using its device class, capabilities, icons, unavailable state, and all those kind of things. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it really depends on your device and your technology on how to proceed. There's a lot of documentation for you to learn how to do that, and maybe even a video as well. So catch you guys in the next one.